Oh my gosh, here we are.
Oh, hello.
Hello, hello. At least us three are here. If there's three people are watching, it could be us. I'm not really sure. But if it's other people, even better. Welcome to Leading Through Stories with Mary, Kristy, and Helen. Thank you to everyone who has joined us live. A big part of Leading Through Stories is that engagement with our community. Based on feedback from our first episode, we're going to continue to do this 20-minute conversation. But after, Helen and Mary and I will stick around. And if you have questions or comments or things you want to touch on from the episode or just that are coming up for you, we are just going to be here to chat about the questions you have. And if nobody has any questions, then we will happily just chat because we're quite good at that. Stick around if you have time. This week, we are talking about telling your story. And one of the questions that was sent to us from the community was, what single event changed your journey? I love that question. When I work with individuals and organizations to support storytelling, I will also use what is a meaningful or transformative moment in your lives. And Helen mentioned earlier as we were talking that it's not just one. It's often it's right. Like it might not be one transformative, but in a single story, there might be a moment you can really pick out. So we'll come back to that stuff.
Cool. We believe everyone is a leader from where they stand and that we all have a story to tell. I just need to preface this whole session. I've got the little Greek granddaughter over here watching a movie, so we can have not a screaming one. So if you hear that music, it's her being very, very well behaved.
It's the background music that one day we will have in our show.
Exactly.
and we love great grandchildren, just saying, and we're hopeful.
Yeah.
So by sharing our stories, we create connections, we build relationships, and we support ourselves and each other through comfortable and, well, sometimes really uncomfortable experiences.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And Leading Through Stories is an authentic conversation about successes, learnings, and sometimes the things we would rather forget.
And our hope is that you, our community, because truly you are our community, will be actively involved and engaged in this process with us. So we're looking forward to having you be involved in our conversations. And note, this session is recorded, so consider what you're sharing as what you all will be sharing, including us, will be available online after today's session.
And the exciting part today is we are raffling one of Kristy's books, Telling Your Story Through Photography. Yay! So your participation in the comments will include you in the draw. So you scroll down to the comments and add your name, first and last name, please.
So I can see already that Cheryl Morgan's here. That's my mom because she has to be. I think we discussed that last time as well.
Hi, Cheryl.
So Cheryl, please put your first and last name in just so we can prove that people are doing this. And then Stephanie Watson is also here. Hello, Stephanie. Throw your name again in the chat just to get people moving on that. Who are we? Mary Michalithes is a leadership development consultant and educator. She is passionate about life and supporting others to live well, to lead well.
Helen Rose? Yeah, it's me.
You're up, Mary.
You thought I froze, didn't you?
Totally.
Helen Rose is an author, motivational speaker, and grief recovery specialist. She found her gift when she learned really how to embrace her story and the story of vulnerability and brokenness.
Oh, thanks, Mary. And our lovely Kristy Wolf is a photographer, a medical mama, and Wolfpack warrior who helps others to narrate their experiences through digital storytelling.
So every time we're with you, we will be including a reflective question. So today's question, it fits a lot with what was already thrown up from the community, but what resonated with you? As you're listening to the conversation, as you are hearing people's stories, as you're thinking about the digital story that we shared leading up to this episode, I want you to think about what is resonating with you, what's standing out for you, what's meaningful for you. So let's actually start there. I want you to throw an idea in the comments. If you had a chance to watch the Telling Stories video, can you add some ideas about what resonated with you? If you didn't have a chance to watch the Telling Stories video, it's just about a 3-minute video. It is about using photography to tell your story. And it's actually the framework that I use even when I'm teaching courses. So it kind of ties you back and introduces you to what I do when I'm teaching. But yeah, throw some ideas in there. I'll be checking that. What resonated for you guys in telling stories through telling stories, digital story?
Digital stories. I'm going to jump in, Mary. One of the things that I loved was the projects from our local Bow Valley and the people that are in. And we said the word earlier was about community. Mary had said, this is our community. And I think the thing that you get is that, for me anyway, is that we really aren't alone, even though our journeys are very different. I love it. And I love the vulnerability of people telling their stories.
And I think just to kind of touch on that, Helen, I'd have to agree. For me, it was that whole idea that it takes courage to tell a story, to put ourselves, and also it takes courage to listen to somebody's story. And so as I was kind of watching that 3 little minute video, the V squared popped into my head, Kristy. It was the visuals that you use to really capture those images, but also the voice that actually complements those visuals. So that's what stood out for me.
And you know what? I have been doing slideshows of photos. When I take photos for a family or an organization, I used to just put them all in, like kind of in chronological order, and put a song behind it. And although I still love that, now that I've done digital storytelling where you actually have the storyteller's voice and then you're choosing the images, it hits me in a totally different way than what I was doing before. So that's something that stands out for me. Telling stories with images is something that I've been doing for the last 9 years, since our kiddo was in the NICU. And photography has always been a major part of my mental health and personal healing journey. My hopes are that when people see me sharing my story, that they kind of have the courage to share their own, or that they feel a little less alone, even if they don't want to share their story. But just knowing that you can, I guess, is something that's really stood out to me. The book, Tell Your Story Through Photography, came about because I needed to process through all the feelings and images and words that I had that were swirling around in my head when our son Kane had his second heart surgery in September 2019. So the layout of the book is kind of set up to explain a little bit about who the characters are in the story, including the photographer that was with us, Roz, was up photographing our family during this heart surgery. It talks about the Together Project. Kane and I photograph together when we're at hospital appointments because he's at an age where I don't want to tell his story anymore. I want him to tell it with me. It's not my story of his to tell. I have to look at mine from that caregiver perspective. And so you kind of see that within here. The second half of the book is all about finding your photo voice and telling your own story. So I talk about things like, think about your purpose, think about your main character, your setting.
I'll be right back. Sorry, great grandchild's calling. I'll be right back. Sorry, Kristy.
No, I love it. I think that's exactly it. And like, that's the reality. I needed a photographer with us in hospital because I am also the mom. I can't be the one taking all the pictures, and the perspectives are different. But just that idea that there's a framework that you can use to tell your story, and that every story is different. This framework will fit different people in different ways. But I think that it is really important for ourselves to see ourselves in our story, our strength and our resilience, our struggle and our hope. All of those parts tie into this. And my hope for people today, or talking about it in the future, that you will tell your story, either for yourself, and no one ever needs to see this, or for a larger audience. So a story that's important that you feel like you need to get out there. So I'm just wondering, I don't often get people's like full attention on my book. What resonated with you in Tell Your Story Through Photography?
For me, I'm going to jump in again. For me, really, I mean, this is what I do too, is a lot of journaling. You do yours through photo, I do mine through journaling. Page 32, you said something that really struck me, and I love it, is that I hold it together most of the time, but sometimes I hit 1 on the coping scale. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Sometimes I just melt down. I really, that's what hit me, was that page. Yeah.
It's interesting for me, Kristy. I loved reading your book. I've put it down. I've picked it up. I've shed some tears. I've smiled. I've laughed. But for me, page 35, where you said, Mama said that there would be bad days like this. And the best way that I know to get through those bad days is really to start talking about it. I mean, that's a great strategy. And for some people, that's really comfortable. And for others, not so much.
Yeah.
And so that question, how do we talk through those bad days? And we all have them. Some more than others for a number of reasons. And, I've been thinking about that question, and I've been very strategic in some of those bad days that I experience. And I try to be proactive in that. So I've created a bit of a live well, lead well calendar. And there are a number of things. There are 30 things that one can do to kind of cope with those challenging days. And day 2 talks about reflection time. Here's your day to really think about what is it that really is your legacy, and how do you get out of that bad day thinking and think ahead? What am I proud of? What am I great at?
I think this is perfect just right now, like hearing banging in the background. Like, one of the things that Helen and Mary and I really thought was important is that this is real. Like, you're going to get our real, like, there's going to be some days where one of us isn't even here because real life took over and we couldn't make it. So yeah, just expect the unexpected when you come hang out with us. Sorry.
Do you want to join?
She might be joining us. Oh no, she's going to pee. Not that I'm sure she needs to have a room, and we know that. It's interesting. I love that calendar that you created, Mary. So one of the things for me is I don't process quickly. So for me to get through my hard days, I run, or I swim, or I walk, or whatever. But it takes me a while to process it, and I've learned that that's okay. I don't need to come up. I think we get caught up in coming up with the answers right away. And it is okay to kind of just run through without getting caught in a loop over it, but just to process and figure how the next time you have a bad day, it all ties in. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it totally does. I think all 3 of us probably.
Yeah. Well,
pretty strongly about that.
One of the things that my daughter-in-law does, she's a brilliant mother, and my son is a brilliant father. When my 3-year-old little one is having 1 on the coping scale, they acknowledge that she's having big emotions. They don't try to take it away from her. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. And I just wanted to throw Stephanie Watts' comment in there. So she just wrote, love the voice that gives the person of the picture without having to find words. I also love how it allows the viewer to put themselves in the picture, giving it personal, different meaning each time.
It's beautiful.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. That was kind of back to what we were talking about with telling stories and with the book. Thanks, Stephanie. How do I get rid of that one? Oh, there we go. So obviously people know for me that bad days, sometimes it's photography, sometimes it's going back through pictures, it might be writing, and it's definitely talking. And yeah, with the people that matter. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have certain people that you go to that you can openly share that story. For me, I especially think of a couple medical moms that I will immediately turn to when I just like need to unload about something going on.
And Kristy, just interrupt. What a gift for those medical moms and yourself, because in that community, there's some safety, that trust, psychological safety, and ability to kind of share from where you both stand, or from where you all stand.
Yeah. And I think that it also comes back to like a group of educators getting together. We'll have like a more in-depth conversation about that than if I'm trying to tell my spouse about what it was like to be teaching that day. Similarly, that's why there are grief groups, right? Like there's that opportunity to already come into something with a connection and then build from there, I think is a really key part.
Yeah, I call those, and that ties down to your community and not being alone, right? Because then they kind of understand where you're coming from. Not always entirely, but you call those landing pads. So that's one of the things to anyone who's listening today or here is think about who your landing pads are. And they're not, they can go, I could go on forever about, they're not always the good landing pads. So have you got healthy landing pads that encourage you and have that empathy for what you're going through?
Yeah. And I noticed a comment in the chat. She said, I'm really amazed by how connections are made. Someone who saw my story. So my mom, Cheryl, did a digital story. Somebody that saw her story was then inspired to do their own story. And that's like right? That like domino effect of like, once somebody's like, oh, this is okay to talk about, it just keeps happening. So anyway,
Your mom's story was amazing. I remember how much it struck me to be
Yeah.
the grandparent and the parent of the family involved. Like very powerful stuff and everything that
Yeah.
your mom has walked through. Yeah.
So yeah. So last week we talked about questions from Mary's book. We talked about, where do I want to go? How will I get there? What evidence will I collect? Who will support me? And I think like she was looking from an educational perspective, but we talked about the fact that that could be anyone, anywhere. And I can think about the same thing if I'm thinking about telling my story. Where do I want to go? How am I going to get there? How am I going to start the story even? What evidence will I collect? For me, that's images. Which images will I be thinking about taking? And who will support me? These ladies, for one, our community, maybe my husband. Like I can see how those tie across even photography. And in my book, I talk about, I use a lot of questions as well, but those questions of, what story do you want to tell? Why do you want to tell your story? And who do you want to tell your story to? Again, knowing that it can just be you. So earlier we brought up the question, what is a meaningful or transformative moment in your life? And I'm just hoping that a few people will throw some ideas in there for us. It could be a single event in your journey, something that stands out that you like keep coming back to. So I threw the question up. People can see it. If you want to throw it in the comments, we would appreciate that. Mary, what about you? Are there any?
Yeah, interesting. So about 5 years ago, as you both know, I made the decision to retire, and that was a big decision for me. And I think I landed in that for about 36 seconds. And I've been thinking about retirement, 36 seconds, and redirecting into this new. And maybe it's time for me to be thinking about, how do I tell that story, not for anybody else, but for me, to really think about, who are my main characters? What was the impetus behind that? And what legacy do I want to leave behind? And what were some of the challenges of that?
Yeah.
So thanks for asking. Yeah, it's been very reflective timing for me.
Mary, sorry, Helen, what about you?
For me, I've got stories. For me, as you know, everything for me.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you for a second. Mary, are you hearing the same like feedback?
Yeah, and
something's going on with your mic, Helen. Try it again now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How's that? No, I haven't touched anything.
You sound like a crazy robot.
Oh. Oh no. Why? Hang on.
I don't know.
How's that? Now, am I gone?
Do you want to tell her, or should I tell her?
I'll tell her. I think it's the same.
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to try and... Can you hear me?
Like a robot. But it's crazy.
I don't know why it's doing it. I haven't touched a thing.
Okay, Helen, I love you. We're cutting you out.
Just leave me.
On. Just smile. Just smile and nod. And Helen, Mary and I will keep going. So, life, right?
Kristy, you're so good at this. Crisis. Oh my God. What do we do?
In our script, you guys, we talked about, Helen was now going to say, hey, Kristy, what are some exciting things coming up for you? And that's where I was going to jump in. So we'll just go from there. So I am in love with digital storytelling. I am doing digital stories with individuals, with organizations. It is a passion project I have. I'm sure we'll end up doing some kind of episode on that down the road. But if digital storytelling is something that you're interested in, there will be a link to the free info sessions that I do. The next one is coming up on October 27th. So in our takeaway email, I will add that in. Another thing that I've been hard at work on is creating some self-study courses through Canmore Together. So one of the courses is Tell Your Story Through Photography. So taking all of these ideas and making it so that you get to spend time working on activities, building things up, and then also you have some time to connect with me about stories like that. Another course is Photography with Kids. I was a teacher for 12 years. I used photography in my classroom. So if using photography with kids, either in your family or as a teacher, is something of interest, then this course might be something that is helpful for you. So those are, I have a wait list going right now because they're not ready yet. They're still in the process, but we'll get back to that.
And I also think, when we talk about that take back, bring back, other things that we can be thinking about, maybe a bit of a call to action. The Canmore Museum has some interesting things that we'd like you to consider. Stories That Matter, projects by Kristy, and kind of leading telling your story through visual representation. It's interesting when you go there, there's a downloadable story planner. I love it from an education perspective because it's pretty easy. I mean, not to simplify your work, Kristy, at all.
No, that's
but
the
it's
whole point.
so easy. It's excellent. It's a 25-minute of self-directed learning, and the end product is what you'll be proud of. So go there. There's a downloadable resource. Feel free to access that. And in addition, there are other sections that are written stories, oral stories, traditions. Like I said, that Canmore Museum is just such a wealth of information. There'll be an email that'll be coming out to you in looking at that notion of feedback moves everybody's learning forward. And how are you going to take something from today's session and try it out? Take a risk. I think, like Lululemon says, do one thing a day that scares you. And maybe this is something that might push you to that limit. It's easy, it's fun, and the product is amazing.
Nice. And you know what? That tell your story visually piece that's on Canmore Museum's website is kind of an introduction to the whole tell your story photography course that I'm doing. So it all kind of comes back together. I actually got an email this morning from myself. So I have a newsletter that was like a drip campaign of like doing photography with kids. And I set one for 1 year from when people started that just said like, where are you at in your storytelling? Is there something I can help you with? And that's all it says. And I was like, oh, this is such a good email. That's some good foresight. I forgot that I did that.
I'd like to know how you responded on that email to yourself.
I didn't. I deleted it. Don't tell anybody. You should
Okay.
also. But it's interesting to see how far that has come, like that I'm putting together a whole course that I end up speaking about it. So yeah. Anyways, Helen, I'm going to say your part again. We're scripting the first few episodes because we really want to get good at this, and then we'll be more cash. But Helen was going to say, just remember, we're doing a draw for the book. So if you've added anything into the comments, your name will go into that. And we have our next episode, our next conversation coming up on November 17th. And that one is going to be kind of directed by Helen. It's the gift of grief. So we definitely hope to see you back here. Oh, she has no sound now.
At least she's got a beautiful smile.
Maybe is she still invited, Mary? Like,
absolutely. We will get rid of those, little viruses that are preventing us from including Helen in the oral conversation today. But one of the things that we'd like to do is just let you know, we're going to hang out for the next 20 minutes. We're open for conversation with you, our community. Please continue to use that chat. And we look forward to having our further conversation with you in November.
November 17th. You got it. Anybody that's already getting emails, you'll get information about it. If you have somebody that you think might benefit from it, feel free to send them the link to sign up or send us a message, or there's a million ways you can connect with us and we can help you out with that. I did notice that Stephanie Watson has a comment in there.
Yes.
And it just says, latest moment, losing my job, ending a relationship, starting a business. Oh, Stephanie, you got a lot of stuff going on right now. So like 4 different stories, and she's talking, I'm going to pull it up so people can see it for those people that are still on with us. So losing job, ending a relationship, starting a business, leaving my community, all of those things are all different stories. And we're talking about all of those things happening at one time. I won't make you guys say how old you are, but I am 40 years old. And that is probably what's happening right now. But over the course of your life, think about how many transformative moments you have, right? It's pretty crazy.
And I like, Kristy, Stephanie's comment there. All of this stuff has really shown me how resilient I can be. And resiliency is such an important word these days. I mean, now more than ever, not that we're going to take it away from the years prior to the past couple, but how do we look at resiliency and what does that mean for us? And as a community of learners, how do we support each other through some of these challenges? leg up, as David Irvin would remind us, who's our leg up partner in assisting with that? So Stephanie, thank you for taking the time to actually make some of your thinking and vulnerability visible to this community.
I know that Helen is just like
Dying to
die. Try it again. No, it's still
Can you hear
doing it.
me? No.
It's still doing it.
At least I can hear you.
You can always write in the comments too.
I might do.
Yeah, because I know that our next session talking about, like, this is just kind of a perfect build up, because when I think about telling your story through photography, it's often a grief story. It doesn't have to be a death story, but it's often a grief story that I am working through. Not when I like go to take family photos of somebody, but digital stories. I was working on one with somebody this morning. It is about grief, and that can come in so many different ways. And that, like, losing your job, that's a grief story. One that I actually find that people bring forward a lot, like when I have done grief work and like photography specifically, often I find that there's a lot of people going through a divorce, that is their grief story. And so I know Helen and I have talked about, and that's like, I can hear Helen.
Does she sound like a robot, Annette?
Do I sound like a robot, Annette? Because if you can hear me, I just want to say it sounds bizarre. I mean, I live around this little island of grief, and it is every part of your life. And it is very powerful to recognize that you're grieving. And it's very powerful to be able to walk through that grief journey, because I promise you, you get to the other side of it with so much more depth to your words and your storytelling.
Yeah.
I hope everyone can hear that.
Well, we can hear it. It comes through. It's just very strange sounding, but we understood everything you said. At least we are at this end. Annette just says
it is crackling, Helen.
That's a good way to describe it.
Thanks, Annette.
So we'll get that all hopefully fixed up. But I think we're learning that every time we do this, like, weird things happen that we can't control, or we just don't have the technical skills to control.
Not yet, anyway, Kristy.
This is about the conversation. Yeah. Like, if one of us blocks out and you can't see our face, like, who cares? I don't know. Oh, it does. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so just a bit of a reminder that we will be sending out some things to you to kind of reflect on. Go to that Canmore Museum link. The Live Well, Lead Well calendar will be sent out to you. And we do really encourage you to continue to think about this digital story process and what's the first next step that you might take.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Are you going to do some photos?
Well, you know what I'm thinking, Kristy? I know that whole notion of grief has come up into conversation. And when I made the announcement to retire, I literally cried for 2 weeks. Yeah. It was really hard. I love being an educator, and it was 36 plus years. And I think I'm going to put some thoughts down on that. Why was that so hard? And what did I do to get out of that? And I had the choice, right? I mean, I had the choice, and it took me 2 years to make that decision. And then when I made the decision, I went, oh my God. Now what? My connection to kids and staff and my community and 36 seconds, and then kind of zipping into that next redirected kind of career. Helen, you're on. I can see you on that.
I'm just vibrating because I love what you're talking about. I'm sorry I'm crackling, but that's professional grief, and we do identify with what we do for our living. And so when we choose to change it, it is still a process that you go through, because now you're creating a new Mary, essentially, right?
Yeah.
In your professional
and you know
life.
What? One of my, when I left teaching, because when we moved to Canmore, I said goodbye to my school. Again, a choice, but also leaving. So I had no idea if I was ever going to be a teacher again. Turns out I'm not going to be a teacher again, but that's
cool.
You
are a teacher in a different way.
Different way. Yeah. But the emotions that you go through, and I thought I could hold it together, and I was like that snot dribbling disaster in front of our entire staff.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've had a couple of clients that have called and said, hey, you mastered retirement really well. I'm thinking of retiring and I can't bear the thought of that. Do you have the time to have a conversation? And actually I'm meeting with somebody on Monday about the grief that they're experiencing and making that decision, right?
Yeah.
There's a
and
package
just finding your new self. What do I do now?
And I think from an educator's perspective, you've got such a narrow vision. I'm only a teacher, or I'm only an educator. Now what? I've got another 30, 40 years to live. And so, yeah, I'm going to actually embed some of this content in our conversation coming up with my client.
And to that point, Mary and Kristy and everybody, we have a polished look of where we sit today, and nobody truly knows unless we talk about it through your digital storytelling, through your live well, lead well, is we have this polished versions of ourselves that it's not necessarily how did you get to that polished version. And I think that's really important when you're talking about your grief journey and who you identify with now. It's a yeah, well, we'll talk about next week when I'm not crackly.
Well, and I feel like this is just like guiding us into what our next conversation will be and like how we decide to do that. So we do want to let people know that we all of the time, every time somebody goes in and signs up for this, they're often leaving questions, and all of those questions we are looking at as we're thinking about the episodes that we already have planned. So there's the gift of grief in November. In December, there's live well, lead well. We plan to keep doing this in the new year, and we haven't decided on what we will be focusing each episode on. So if there's things that are coming up for people, please let us know. The other thing that we wanted to touch on, maybe this is a good time, is that there is a community space called Can More Together, which you can be a part of. You don't have to be a part of. You have free access to certain things. But a lot of people were finding that they were getting quite a few emails, and we have a solve for that. So if you were getting emails, you want to be there, you want to kind of see what's going on, but you don't want all the emails, I can send you exactly how to fix that. So just send me a message through our Leading Through Stories Instagram. Oh, I could put that up. Look.
Yeah, you could. I was just going to say.
I love StreamYard for doing these kinds of things. So we're at Leading Through Stories on Instagram. You get emails from us if you're already registered. So you can just go through and respond to either. I think what's our email? Is it mary.kristy.helen@gmail.com? But I also include all three of us. So if you ever have a question for one of us, I put our emails when I'm sending out the group emails. I send our emails like in the ones that you can actually see that are not blind. So you can respond to any of us if you have some questions. Yeah. We still have 3 people, but they're not really talking to us.
Well,
which I mean, we're good at talking to each other. But guys, if you are still watching and you do want to add something in, feel free, jump on.
And thank you for participating today. What an honor it is to work with you and through chat, obviously. And as Kristy said, it's the feedback that you provide for us that informs our next level of series, because what you say matters, right? What your questions are really make a difference.
Absolutely. And I think we have to thank I think we have to thank our little one over here because she was beautiful today.
Yeah, totally. And like I'm glad it happened. Like I'm glad things go wrong, because I think that's a big part of it. We talked about the fact that we're like successes and learnings and things you'd rather forget. Like, yeah, that happens.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be so polished that it seems canned, right? And it goes back to that point about I could let this moment, because I don't know if I'm a bit of a perfectionist, maybe I am, but it was like, how's that going to affect my stress-o-meter, I like to call it? And it didn't, because you have to embrace things that are thrown at you without being, falling apart. Yeah. I'll fall apart later, but I probably won't, because I thought it was brilliant.
Not worth it.
And I must add that both Kristy and Helen are, I would say, experts at podcasting. I literally break out a sweat. So this is my second podcast, thinking, oh my Lord. And so I just love listening to these women who have taught me so much about where do you stand? Where do you look? Where's the content that you want to share? And again, back to that, do that one thing that scares you frequently, if not daily. It's a learning process. So thank you for being so patient, ladies.
Well, and on that note, we're going to be doing a podcast with Mary, but Kristy, you tell us about our podcast because I'm too crackly.
You know what? I was going to say, let's save that for next week.
Okay, let's save it for next week.
Yeah, let's save it for next week. It just ties it back. We don't need to jump into that. But what was I forget what I was going to say.
Annette, thank you for your comments. Just, they're so joy bringing. We're authentic truly because that's who we are. And we really appreciate your comments. Stephanie and Cheryl, just thank you.
Yeah,
It's
thank
just
you guys.
wonderful to see those comments.
Amazing.
So I'm going to end our broadcast if everybody's cool with that. Yeah, delightful. I will see you guys regularly. Everybody else will see you in a month on November 17th.
And good luck with the draw. It's an amazing book. You'll laugh, you'll cry.
I love that you're all holding it. Thank you.
Go, Kristy,
All right.
go.
Go, Kristy.